Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we finally get to look at the Mattel Halo 5 Fred figure. This is part 2 of Series 1, technically. We haven't started a new series or a new wave, so I guess it's technically a new wave, but it's still Series 1, so we still have all of the same engineering, same issues with the foot armor and that kind of thing. You would think that these figures would definitely suffice. They're going to fill in the gap. We're going to finally have Blue Team. They're going to be as good as the first batch of figures, given the flaws that were there. They were still pretty solid. However, Fred and Kelly here are not as good as the first wave. It's very disappointing, but we're going to go through it all so you can see what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. Okay, so this guy stands just about 16.5 centimeters, which makes him just about 6.5 inches, right around there. So again, we're still just shy of true 1/6 scale, or 1/12 scale. They're going to be about the same size as Marvel Legends, which means they're not anywhere near as big as they should be. That's okay, they don't need to be, but that's just something you should know if you're coming into this line new. Something else you should know is that all of the armor is removable. That is both a gimmick for selling these to kids and a gimmick to make it much cheaper for them to manufacture. They can make one body and then just have all of the armor separate. That would be okay, and it wasn't terrible on the first batch of figures because for the most part the armor stayed on well enough. Now on Fred and Kelly's the other one that came in this bunch, it doesn't stay on well. Fred's is not nearly as bad as Kelly's, but it's still not great. Things like the little tiny ball peg, or not ball peg, I'm sorry, just standard peg, little tiny peg in there. You see that? Let me zoom in so you can see that. That little peg right there is the only peg that's supposed to hold this armor onto him. And it doesn't work at all. It doesn't peg into that at all. You can even see how shallow that peg hole is. It can't hold the armor. The only thing that keeps the armor in place, practically speaking, is that it's C-shaped and it fits around the arm. But it's constantly moving. It doesn't sit where it's supposed to because of that. It's a big problem. Other problem is this piece right here wasn't even connected in the package. I had to glue that. So if you do have to glue that, be very careful you don't get glue all over the figure. It's just floating around in there, bouncing around. So that's not good. The leg armor fits okay for him. The boots are still not a great design, but his aren't terrible. As you can tell, they sit mostly flat and they fit the feet mostly. So hopefully they fix that. I'm pretty sure they are going to fix that for the next batch of figures, but by then we'll already have Blue Team, so I don't know if they're going to release Blue Team again or what. That's kind of a problem for me. I don't really understand what they're going to do there. Other problems with this guy before we get into the good stuff, he's totally floppy. We have a very flaccid Fred. That's not good. That ball peg for the torso is very limp. And then same thing for this arm right here. It's very floppy also. This arm, not quite as bad, but still not good. And then the legs are mostly solid. So I don't know what happened. It's like their QC just went totally down the drains between these two semi-waves. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know what's up with that. The other thing worth mentioning is that the armor is sitting probably too high up on his chest. And it's mostly in his face. It's going to be like that most of the time because it just doesn't fit right. It should be way lower, and since it's soft and removable technically, you can kind of push it forward and it'll hopefully stay down there to help you a little bit, but it's still just not very well executed. Very problematic. Now we're going to run through the articulation properly in a minute, but first I do want to talk about the paint because I think even though there is a lack of paint on this whole batch of figures in general, he's got a significant amount of paint on him, and I think it looks pretty good. You can see right here on the chest alone, we have those dark grays up against that kind of a slate blue that he has with a little bit of yellow, a little bit of silver. There's a lot of paint going on in the helmet. That's very clean looking. I like the visor. We see more going on the arms. Another good example is over here on the back. There's a lot of black added in there to bring out the details. I think it's aesthetically pleasing for the most part. They have enough paint on there, and this is what I said for the first bunch. There's enough. It's enough paint to make them look good. I do wish the armor was molded in a little bit of a higher quality plastic. Also, not only because the plastic itself looks a little cheap, but because the detailing is a little bit soft. It's not bad. If the QC is there, I think these figures are good enough for the price point, but with bad QC, it's just not a good situation, and that's the problem here. So before we do the articulation, accessory-wise, we have the DMR and the pistol. And again, they both seem oversized and lacking detail. The DMR does have a little bit of paint on it, but it looks very cheap, and like I said, I think they're very much oversized. I don't know, I could be wrong, but it's pretty huge. And they do have pegs for them also. We have a short peg and a long peg, but the pegs don't hold the weapons very well at all. It won't even fit in the DMR, and the pistol, it does hold it, but not very well. So again, QC is just not great. And if you're wondering if he can hold the gun properly, he really can't. It pulls the hand off the trigger guard, or off the grip, and it's just not well executed. As far as the articulation goes, we have a ball peg for the head, which is fine. You can move the head around well enough. You can swivel it, lean it back a little bit, lean it forward a lot, and you can even lean it side to side a little bit. So that's pretty good. For the shoulders, we have our a true ball hinge. You can bring the arm all the way up, but as soon as you do, the armor pops off. It's not terrible, but it's not great. I imagine most people are going to glue the armor in place, but that's still not a great solution because it still doesn't fit the figures very well. Fred's isn't the best example of that. I'll show you on Kelly's review how bad it is. Also, I'd like to just point out how floppy he really is. As I'm holding the torso, the bottom half is just completely limp. Anyway, you have your full shoulder ball hinge, which gives him good range. Can't complain about that other than the looseness. You have your bicep swivel in there. Right there, so that's pretty good. You have your double jointed elbow, which is good, I think. For the most part, you get decent range, a little bit better than 90 degrees. We still do need another swivel down here, and they could easily solve that by, instead of having this piece of the elbow just peg in squarely, it could be a regular peg, which gives you a rotation, which would have been very easy for them to do. Hopefully they do give us that. That will allow them to hold their weapons much better. But we do have the double jointed elbow. And then for the wrists, we have a peg and a hinge, and the peg is really floppy. So I don't know what happened. The QC just went totally away. It's gone on these figures. The painted blue part, by the way, looks way nicer than the rest of the armor because it actually is metallic. So you guys already saw that ball peg for the torso, which is just garbage. We have our hips that rotate a little bit forward and a little bit out to the side, but the armor gets in the way. So yeah, it's better than the McFarlane figure, but with the armor not staying on or having to tuck under, it's not the best situation in the world. And really, we don't need the splits. We need to be able to move them in like a running pose, and you're just barely going to be able to do that because of the way the hips are designed. So I was way more into this line the first time around. The second time around, with the flaws, everything else is starting to look even worse. I think they didn't do themselves any favors by making a lazy batch of figures with poor QC. We have a double jointed knee, which does work nicely, so that's pretty good. No real complaints there. I like that. And then for the ankles, we have a hinge, which gives us decent range. It's not the best, but it's okay. And then you get your ankle rocker, but it throws the foot off at such a crazy angle, it's basically useless. If you're going to have it at such a crazy angle, you have to have a true ball hinge so you can rotate the ankle with it, but you can't. And then we still have those lousy boots. So, if this figure had come out in the first batch, I would not have been pro this line of figures at all. The QC on this guy is terrible, and it makes all of the other things that aren't great look even worse. So, it's just acceptable, and that sucks, because I think the Halo fans deserve good Halo figures at this point. We deserve a good blue team. We've been spending money on this franchise for well over a decade now, and we're still getting handed stuff that's just not quality. It's very disappointing, and hopefully Mattel can rectify it, but I don't know. So far, this batch especially leaves me very much wanting, so it's very disappointing for me. So there it is, guys. Not a happy camper. I don't know. It's not good. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a whole bunch. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you might want to do that because I have new videos up every single day. So we talk about movies, TV shows, video games, action figures, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you come back for that. And in the meantime, keep collecting.